Any heretics in the room? Let me see a show of hands. How many heretics? So, our word heretic, a person who commits heresy. Why is it so scary for so many people? The word comes from the ancient Greek, means one who chooses. One who chooses. Isn't that scary? One who chooses. Now I argue, it's my belief that free will isn't something given to us at birth. It's something we earn through life experience and through the choices that we make. I hold that everybody has the potential to achieve free will, but not everyone achieves it. It doesn't happen all at once. It usually comes to us in increments. On top of that, I contend free will requires us to be vigilant lest we lose it. Many of you know I eat a whole food, plant-based diet, and I see it as an exercise of my free will. I've chosen to eat only plant-based foods. I'm a food heretic. I readily admit I'm a food heretic. This isn't to say that I don't like cheese. I love the taste of cheese. Not only that, I love how cheese makes my body feel. Fills me with all wonderful chemicals. Ooh, I'm rewarded by it. Evolution has done this to us. It makes me feel good. In a similar fashion, the smell of steak on the grill, well, it's like the old cartoons. It just calls to me. Yet I choose to follow my free will and not my conditioning. Like everyone, I was conditioned to eat certain foods. The foods of my culture and family, everything chosen for me. And had I been born into a different culture, my diet would be correspondingly different. I would have been conditioned differently. That is the way of things. We find eating dogs morally reprehensible because we have been conditioned to see dogs as our friends. Now, is that fundamentally different than a Hindu refusing to eat beef? Because they have been conditioned differently. Religion, worldviews, theologies, however we want to term that. For the sake of argument, for this talk, it's inclusive of all genders, all understandings of God, goddess, and no God, no goddess. Our worldviews, like the food we eat, is a conditioned response, largely dictated by our culture and family background. Most of us here are religious heretics, choosing to practice our free will in regards to our religious beliefs. At least that's the story we like to tell ourselves, right? Whether that's an accurate belief is yet to be determined. Because it is possible to reject one theology, one belief system in principle, yet still be under its influence in other ways. So, as an example, let me return to my choice to eat vegan foods. The first time I tried to go meat-free years ago and dairy-free, I thought it was enough to just stop eating all animal products without much consideration given to how my food was grown and to what degree it was processed. So I ate quite a bit of pasta, breads, frozen processed patties. I tried all the vegan junk foods, all the meat substitutes, and I thought I was doing great. The result was that I found it difficult to stay vegan because all that processed food was actually making me feel worse than all the meat and dairy that I had given up. I had chosen to reject the idea of eating meat and dairy But I didn't question my relationship with food in general, and the food, our whole culture around food. I had been conditioned to eat highly processed, carb-rich foods. And when I stopped eating meat and dairy, I ate even more of them. I didn't consider how something made to be vegan might be unhealthy in other ways. Now, many of us do not agree with the traditional understanding of a God sitting in heaven passing judgment on the world. Yet how many of the biases and judgments that come out of that worldview go unquestioned? Do we question, this is one of the processes that we've gone through, welcoming congregation is a lot of the people who have rejected certain theologies might still carry on certain ideas about gender and homosexuality. That hasn't gone unquestioned because they didn't realize they were connected, that it came out of that worldview, not just in our understanding of nature. Is it alive or is it dead? Is it here for us or are we here for it? These are questions that came out of that worldview, of a world created by something outside of it. That's actually what happened, when we look at this relationship between Western science and Western religion. Many believe that this rivalry between the two exists because they are diametrically opposed to each other. But I see it more as a sibling rivalry. The scientific worldview that took shape in the 17th and 18th centuries and gave rise to the age of reason, the foundation of modern thought. All of this was shaped by certain unquestioned assumptions that humans stood at the pinnacle of nature, thus giving us dominion over all of it. It was assumed that the natural world is here for us to use because it had no soul, no inherent worth. So we could cut it down. We could kill it. Just out of our curiosity or for our use. It wasn't alive. This assumption, which Western religion inherited from the Greeks, was never brought into question by either science or religion until about 50 years ago or so. It was thanks in large part to Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Of course, certain individuals, including scientists and religionists, did come to question the assumption, but the general idea that nature was at our disposal was hardly challenged until it all started to fall apart in the 1960s. At the same time, my point here is that no matter how hard we try, it's nearly impossible to free ourselves from outdated or incomplete notions about reality, the old theologies, the old belief systems that we inherited growing up. And it's true of outdated religious and scientific ideas. Many things we learned growing up that were considered, scientific, knowledge then, we know to be inaccurate now, but yet we often still follow them out of habit because we haven't questioned them. So there's no way really, I'm afraid, to inoculate ourselves completely from these mistakes. But there are certain precautions that we can take. Because the fact is, everyone has a theology of some sort. The agnostic says we can't know such things. And that's their story. The atheist says there are no gods of any kind. The theist might say, my God is the God of the universe. Deist, God built the universe like a clock, wound it up, let it go to operate according to natural law. The polytheists argue that there are many manifestations of God or goddess. In pantheists, everything is God, goddess, and God and goddess is everything. The non-theist says the question of God is not relevant to me. And then there's the panentheist, everything in God and God in everything. And there are more variations of these. And they're all just variations of a story. Because theology is just a story. It's our story, the one that we've adopted, or the one we inherited. Because everyone has one. And some have chosen our story. Some have chosen their theology. And some had theirs chosen at birth. Some had it thrust upon them by experience that brought everything into question. And everyone has a story coloring the world, shaping our reality. And so for the sake of argument, we can understand this theology as a map, a paradigm that we create to help us understand the world. It's how we relate. And in his book, The Conscious Paradigm, author John Smotherman writes, "Good paradigms benefit us by improving durability to interact with our world and to live happier, more productive lives. But at best, they state not what is, but rather our best understanding about what is. Paradigms are made by us for us." That is such a key distinction. We make them, or we inherit them, but they are still a human invention. And they state not what is, but our best understanding of what is. Now, Smotherman also notes when we forget this crucial point, that they are created by us, we can find ourselves enslaved by our own creation. Consider how much of what we do, and by we I mean people in general, how much we do without ever seriously questioning why we do or how we do it. And frankly, it's time to seriously question how we do everything. Smotherman points out that by shaping how we view and what we assume about reality, we can make huge changes in our lives, our societies, and our planet. And so in studying his book and others like his, it's occurred to me that Unitarian Universalism, within our tradition, we have something that is useful for going forward in a new way, in a more healthy way. And it's the idea of covenant. You can't see this. This is actually kind of the history of covenant within the Jewish tradition, from Noah to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to the modern Jewish tradition. Covenant is an ancient idea. And as I said, with the children, it's just contract to promise. And from the Jewish idea, there's the idea of there's a covenant, there's a promise, a contract they've made with their God. And it's a covenantal relationship. It's not a belief-based relationship that the Jews have with their God. They're not tied to a certain belief. It's about following the law, and it's about that relationship. A contractual agreement of sort that said we promised to do certain things and God promised to do certain things. Now, in our own tradition, our covenant, we generally understand it as with each other. We covenant, we promise to walk together in love and compassion. That's our covenant. It's phrased in different ways. But the history of our covenant within our tradition, it goes back to the early congregational churches in New England, is that it was a covenant to walk together and to learn and grow with each other. And I believe now, this first quarter of the 21st century, I believe this idea can be expanded upon to be for us a unifying story or theology or paradigm, map, story to help us fully develop our free will, live up to our potential as human beings. So what if covenant wasn't just something we talked about, but it was our, for the lack of a better word, our theology, a truly relational theology or worldview. And it's a worldview, a paradigm that held up the interdependent web of existence and our relationship to it as the highest good. Our relationship with it is the highest good. Relationship is the highest good. That's what a covenant is. It's a relationship. How we have chosen to relate. And at the core of this paradigm would be our covenant, our promise to serve the web of life, to serve each other, to serve life would be our promise. And this covenant wouldn't be just some words we read on Sunday, but would be at the core of every decision we made as a spiritual community, at the core of everything we did and said as Unitarian Universalists. And what if we built this theology not a little from this religion, a little from another, but made it fresh and new based on the idea that all life has inherent worth, not merely human life? Everyone has a theology, a worldview, a paradigm that serves as our map for navigating our way through life. Most of us have thoughtfully modified that map to one degree or another to better fit our changing world. Most of us have thoughtfully modified that map. But imagine if we worked on it together. And we had a shared map. A well-conceived, comprehensive map that we shared to help guide us through life. A map that is based on the most up-to-date science about our objective reality and can be changed as new information is discovered. Because we made it. We can change it. Because this is a paradigm of relationship and not belief. The primary practice is learning to let go of all the old patterns of thought and behaviors that serve to restrict our free will. Because it's a relational paradigm, it is based on our idea of covenant. There are no special beliefs to adopt. You don't have to accept anything new. And you can hold on to any beliefs about the divine, the sacred that you already have. Because this is a relational framework. Interdependence is a fact of life. Period. Not something we believe in, it's a fact of life. And what we do to the smallest corner of the web affects the whole of it, and that is a fact. Now, the difference between what I'm proposing, what I'm putting out there for us to consider, the difference between what I'm talking about and what we already do is just a matter of degree. It's a matter of commitment. Currently, we covenant to affirm and promote interdependence and inherent worth and dignity. We covenant to affirm and promote. What I'm proposing is that we go beyond affirming and promoting and live the covenant, live the promise. I understand the resistance. This flies in the face of our conditioning. But given all that is going on in this world, perhaps such a radical shift may be exactly what is needed. UU minister Peggy Clark, she wrote in her blog a few years ago, Earth is one body. We are all part of a single system. We shouldn't be asking each other what issue we're fighting, but if we're dismantling the system that divides us. Are we in common struggle to topple the narrative, the story that tells us some people and species are expendable? Are we working to live into a new paradigm of wild, radical interconnectedness? The fight for justice is the fight for life in every form. It's time to rewrite the narrative. One planet, one fight, and we're all in it together. Is it really that radical? The time of 10 easy things you can do to help the planet, or 10 simple steps to anything, that's gone. We can continue rearranging the deck chairs if we wish by railing against the status quo. But I think our time and effort is better spent creating the world we wish to see, a world where all people are free to live in peace and harmony with each other and the planet. Doesn't mean we stop resisting. But at the same time, we need to be building an alternative. And I think within our tradition, there's some real promise to make that happen. It's whether we are willing to make that shift, to make that commitment, to make it happen. So be it. Amen. Blessed be.